Hi guys, my name is Anna, you're watching simcue, and without further ado, let's get into this video. So I finally found the time to come back and work on our Palais Garnier and doing more of the interior. I just want to put out a big disclaimer though, that technically it isn't really finished, but I don't really see myself working on it any further than this unless like multiple people request it, because this is still just such a big build, and what you're seeing today was a big task. And as the building was also starting to like load slower and slower and everything taking longer and longer to be actually placed, I did make the decision quite early on to not furnish like every single room. So we are primarily focusing on the foyer, the entrance area, the grand staircase hall, and then also what I have learned is called the house, like the actual seating area and the stage. So what I'm currently working on is the foyer that also has these large columns. That is very much a thing that repeats itself throughout this build. And so I'm trying a couple of different options, because what really bothers me, and I know that I mention it in so many videos, but why can't I like place a column as an item? That would be so nice so that they don't always have to snap to the grid. But since they do snap to the grid, I did try to take out outside columns, which is what you saw me do beforehand, like try to scale them down and then also use them here on the inside. But while they work great for the outside and while they don't technically look bad on the inside, they just look a little too like rustic. I believe that is an English word and me not just translating a Danish word, but they kind of just didn't really look nice enough for the place. We have all of these beautiful doors from Get Famous and then these just like stone columns. It just didn't really add up, because I would have preferred for them to be like marble columns. So instead what you're ending up seeing here is that I place these like, I actually don't really remember the name, but like foundational pieces. I'm pretty sure they are from Businesses and Hobbies. And then I place these Get Famous pieces on top of them. So technically they are supposed to be real columns, but I think I just preferred for this foyer to look like more grand and also just a lot nicer. So that is what we're focusing on. We will come back to the foyer, but for now we are moving on to the grand staircase hall. So when you search Palais Garnier, this will also show up in the pictures, and especially if you search Palais Garnier like interior, there are so many pictures of this staircase hall. And it is also kind of crazy. There are clearly a lot of staircases going on. There are also staircases leading down to what I presume is a basement. We do not have that in this build, because I was honestly scared every single time I added rooms and walls that something would just like crash or glitch out or the entire thing would just break, because it was so big at this point and everything was loading very slowly. So you're watching this at ×6 speed. I used to show videos at ×8, but I did find that they're just a little too quick and might cause a bit of motion sickness. So these are now at 6 point speed. But my point is that you can't really see just that like 1 second delay there was to adding like all of the walls. So that is also like the main reason as to why at the end you will see that there are rooms that I decided to just like black out and not do anything about, because it was becoming a very, very heavy build. But what you saw me struggle with quite a lot was like figuring out the height of the different stairs, because there are these like large stairs going up and then spreading to each side. And I feel like that's the main like focal point in this grand hall, so I really wanted to nail that. But I kind of wanted each of the stairs to be like at a similar height so that none of them felt too short, and that's why we are using all of the platforms. And in general, as with most other big builds or with builds where I'm trying to replicate something from real life, it's a lot of just trial and error. So I really also wanted to use these like curved staircases, because I felt like that could add something, and I also feel like they are kind of curved in real life, but it kept on like not wanting to place, and it took me so long to realize that it's because while regular stairs can go on top of like a half wall, a curved stair can't. And I don't know why, but the flared stairs just seem to cause a bit more trouble than regular stairs. So what we end up with is that the lower stairs are flared out only at the bottom, and then both of these like upper staircases are flared out just one bit, both at the top and at the bottom. And right now it's not very like seamless. There are like gaps in between the fence and then the actual staircase, but we will come back and fix that at least a little bit later on. So this grand hall also has these like massive arches, and I was really struggling with what to do with that. Because to be honest, when I started, this build like felt enormous. This is a 65 by 65 lot, and the build almost takes up like the entire lot. So I thought I had this like crazy big space that I needed to fill out on the inside. But when I then counted out like the stage and the house, there actually wasn't that much space left. So believe it or not, but this grand hall is actually a lot smaller than I wanted it to be, because there simply wasn't any more space than that. And that just baffled me like multiple times. But I just want to quickly comment on what you're actually watching right now, which is that I placed a door and then with the tool mod sort of detached it from the wall. And it's because in real life there is a door once you come up the stairs, but we can't actually really have that in The Sims 4 because right now it's like in between two levels. So this door isn't functional, but I really like the look of it. Anyway, my point from before is that since this grand hall is a lot smaller than I wanted it to be, everything just becomes a lot more squished. And when everything becomes a lot more squished, it's like everything needs to be downsized, including the arches. So originally I wanted the stairs to be wider, I wanted them to be taller, and I wanted these arches to kind of follow through two levels. But that wasn't possible. So we end up just using like regular arches on, I think, medium wall height. And while I still feel like in the game that looks fine, it's definitely not as grand as what it seems to be in real life. But I mean, that is a general struggle. This place is so heavily decorated and there was really no way I could follow up on that. So unfortunately, we gotta make do with what we have. But the good thing about changing to these only like 2 tile arches is that the balcony would then also fit, because there are just like multiple balconies around this entire grand hall. And so what I very quickly had to accept is that the interior, I think, is even more than the outside, just sort of inspired by the Palais Garnier, because there was no way I could make the rooms big enough that I could decorate them enough for it to kind of actually look like what it does in real life. So I tried my best to pick out as many elements as possible that I could somewhat replicate in The Sims 4, so that we kind of get the feel of the Palais Garnier, even though it unfortunately doesn't look quite as similar as what I wanted it to. But one thing that I did notice in the pictures is that there is so much light in this grand hall, and a lot of the lights are pretty unique, I would say. So in between the arches, it seems like there are these like outdoor lampposts, is almost what it looks like, that are then surrounded by like multiple other lamps. And so I looked through all of our lamppost options and I really only found, I think these ones are from City Living, and it bothered me a little bit having to use that pack because it otherwise seemed pretty unnecessary, but they were honestly the only ones that fit that well. And then I merged them with this base game candle holder that is to imitate the other lights surrounding it. And I think it somewhat works out, and we will also be coming back later to add even more like custom lamps to this place. But when I start out, what I usually do is I just try to get a feel of the place and then sort of move on to the next task, so that I don't get too far into a process if I then have to come back and make a lot of changes because it doesn't really fit. So we are therefore moving on to the house and the stage. So this I already tested out on another lot because I knew loading up this lot it would be very slow. So I wanted to test this out and see if it was actually possible, the idea that I had in mind. And my idea was to use the rounded walls but on the inside, which I personally haven't. And technically it should make sense, but I just feel like we have so many glitches with the curved walls that I honestly didn't know if I could have them as like indoor walls. But it does actually work, and I'm so happy that it does work, because I feel like it's just such a big part of the house to have this like rounded balcony at the back. You will, however, later see me struggle with it because curved walls will always be cursed walls, but it does end up working out. But for now, I am happily unaware, and I'm just continuing to add all of these many chairs. So in the beginning, I wanted to make a walkway in the middle that was leading up to the back area, and it was a little bit difficult for me to, at least from the pictures that I found, to actually see if that was true or not. But I decided to scrap the idea and instead make pathways in each side, because I realized that the very center would be like the best seats. So while I am unsure of what it's like in real life, it just seems like kind of a shame to take away the absolute best seats in the house. So the next thing that I did, which you're seeing a little bit of here, is that I'm squishing all of the chairs together to fit in more, just so that the house seemed a lot fuller. And then another thing that I decided to do, which is very common in most theaters, is to align every other row to either have like 2 chairs or 1 chair in the middle. If you haven't been to a lot of theaters, the reason is that it allows you to watch in between 2 people instead of having like 1 person right in front of you obscuring your view. It was kind of a lot of work, and it's just a very small detail that technically doesn't matter because honestly this build is kind of useless, but these are the nice little neat details that we care about here on this channel. So when we actually reach the curve, I can't really make like multiple platforms anymore, so these last 3 rows are technically all at the same level, which in real life of course they wouldn't be, but I still just wanted to add more chairs to the house. What I also did was to round multiple of the seats on the edges to put even more emphasis on the fact that this is like rounded walls. And I think it ends up looking quite good, if I do say so myself. So from here I go in and I add carpet to all of the floors, red carpet. That is the color that they use in Palais Garnier, but it's also the color that they use in basically any theater I've been to, also including cinemas. And I probably should have like googled why, because I'm unsure, but surely there is a reason, or like multiple countries were like, yeah, red is the right color for the house. If you happen to know why, please leave a comment because that is such a fun fact, but we are just rolling with it. So the next thing is that I turned the walls into fences because we are also going to add balconies. And this was the other thing that I tested, if I could have these like curved walls and then sort of add a room around them and use that for the balconies. And this worked so much better than I dared to hope for. If you don't remember, all of the floors in this building actually are at different heights. So our first floor is medium wall height, our second floor is tall wall height, which is what we're currently working on, and then our third floor is only short wall height. But this happened to just work absolutely perfectly for the seatings in the house, because the medium wall height at the bottom allowed us to have like multiple raised platforms without it looking weird at all. And then what I'm doing here with the tall wall height is that the tall wall height is technically tall enough for us to basically have like 2 floors, which is just absolutely incredible because it allows us to add this like fake balcony in between. So I added all of these individual balcony pieces from Discover University, and then you're seeing me play around with arches a little bit until I end up adding like a room behind it and then raising that up to match the balconies. I then added spandrels and also a tall half wall to the inner wall of the house, if that makes sense. And I think with the Discover University balcony piece, we do get the sense that this balcony is somewhat covering our lower balcony, and so we actually do get the sense overall that we just have like multiple levels of balconies. I don't know how many times I said that word. I am so sorry for repeating the same word over and over, but at the end of the day, that is what it is. And I'm pretty sure in real life there are also like 3 levels of balconies, and we actually get to do that here in The Sims 4 as well. And I just feel like that's so cool. I was so pleased with this. Even though it caused some trouble later down the line, I just think that this house and stage turned out so well. I did have to custom place the chairs, like raise them up so they are technically placed on the same floor as the other ones, but visually they are placed on the balconies. And while I'm technically a little bit unsure of whether your Sims would be able to use like any of the chairs on these balconies, I did also raise up a floor behind them so that it at least looks like there is access to the balconies. But we will come back to that a little bit later, and I think what I'm explaining will then actually make sense. But right now we have moved on to what is the 3rd floor, so the uppermost balcony of the house. So this is what I've already mentioned is at short wall height, but it actually just works so well because it means that it is the exact same height as the 2 balconies that we already did and added to the tall wall height. I hope everything I'm saying makes sense as you're watching it, because I'm realizing that it's a little bit difficult to explain because there's just like so many levels and things in between, but hopefully you can see what I mean. So for the stage in real life, it has this like gorgeous curtain, and I really wanted to add something big, something grand to this space as well. So I was very happy when I found that this curtain from cats and dogs, which again, I was like, are we really adding that pack? But it was the only curtain that would end up like matching in width. And the fact that it also had a red version with an edge that almost looks golden was just like too perfect. And as you can see in some of the clips, the curtain was originally added to a wall that I then just turned into a spandrel. And I actually think that works really nicely for us. So adding in a few columns, adding a few more details, also finishing up the upper balcony, which looks identical to the first one I did because these are just chairs generally placed on the floor. So this was also much easier to do. So again, I just squished some chairs together, custom placed like half of them. I feel like there are so many items in this build that had to be custom placed, but it was very worth it. And then we're choosing some red wallpaper, adding doors, and also adding some lights. Now, I'll admit that actually pretty early on, I stopped looking at photo references of this place because there was just no way I would be able to like copy all of the details. And also because certain things had to be squished, there was a lot more of just trying to like make sense of these rooms. So I actually don't know where the entrance doors to these different levels are. I just placed them where they made sense in my build. So while our house is inspired by the one in Palais Garnier, and while I tried to make sure that it had like just as many balconies and it had some of the similar colors and also the columns are placed like accordingly, it is also just heavily based on what I remember theaters looking like. And the doors are basically just placed where they made the most sense. And since the fake balconies couldn't really go on these like diagonal walls, it just made a lot of sense that the doors were there instead. So that is where the doors are. I don't know where the normal entrances are, but that's where I chose to place them. So there's just a little short clip of me placing a chandelier, and you might be a little bit confused as why I was like up on the roof for it. But in real life, we have this coupole. What? I don't know what that's called in English. I should have looked that up. But we have this like rounded roof that is obviously open from the inside. So when you're actually sitting in the house, there is this like rounded piece going all the way up to the roof, and it is heavily decorated with paintings. And then from that roof hangs the chandelier. And I didn't really know when I started all of the interiors whether or not it would actually match up. But I was kind of happy to find that it actually did match up. So the one chandelier, because I ended up adding two just to have a bit more light, even though in real life there's only one chandelier. One of the chandeliers in Sims 4 as well, and this is again a little neat detail that no one cares about, but it is technically placed underneath a round roof, exactly in the center. And I just happen to think that that's really cool. While I've been rambling on about a chandelier, you are watching me creating the stage. So the Palais Garnier is the opera house in Paris, but is also used for ballet. At least I'm pretty sure that that fact is correct. But since we can't really do that, I decided to just turn it into a stage so that it more so just looks like a theater. Now, in the beginning, you saw me place a few musical instruments because I was thinking that then at least the building had like some purpose and maybe it could be used as like a lounge. But I then remembered that this build is just so big and it would at all times feel really empty because you can only have like 20 Sims load into a lot. And even if a mod, if you load in like 40 Sims, the house that you're seeing, like all of the seats, I counted them. There is space for 288 Sims. So it's like no matter what you do, unless you have some crazy mod that somehow doesn't like just crash your game, this lot is just going to feel completely empty. So this is probably the first time that I've built something where technically it works and your sim can walk around, and I think that's cool if you just want to like come and visit it and have a look at it, but it serves like no purpose. It's basically useless because there's not really anything to add that would make sense. So yeah, I could have added musical instruments and then 5 Sims could have played instruments and like 10 Sims could have been looking at them. And sure, in one of the other big rooms, I could have added a bar and then some Sims could sit there at the bar. But I just felt like it made more sense to try our best to make it somewhat similar to the Palais Garnier, except that it's not really going to be super useful and instead just like enjoy the build. And I know that some of you do just enjoy the videos but technically don't care about the builds actually being in The Sims 4, and I'm very much the same. So we're just going to enjoy this build and accept that it's not, I don't know, you can download it if you like want to have a look at it or just think it's like cool to have in the world, but there's really no reason for your Sims to come here. But even so, I wanted to make sure that everything was actually properly connected, and if you wanted to, your Sims sim could actually walk around in the build. And that is why I spent probably over an hour just trying to figure out these stairs, which you don't even really see in any of the pictures. But because we end up with like so many weird levels, it was actually kind of difficult to find out like how to make some stairs that make sense, but that also look like they fit the space. For sure, I can just like add a staircase, but with a place like this, you don't just have staircases. So I think the footage kind of speaks for itself, showing like how many different things I tried to make something that somewhat fit the build, but would also just be made up on a whim. And my problem was, which is probably a little bit difficult to actually see in the footage, but it was like I needed the staircase to lead down to the door that led into the house, but I also needed stairs going upstairs to the balcony upstairs. But it was like no matter how I twisted and turned things, I would always end up with staircases that was kind of just like leading into a wall, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And as someone who likes to pay maybe a little too much attention to detail, I'm someone who likes to take into consideration that even though a sim technically could walk a really weird route and get upstairs, if you design a place, and especially if you design a place like the Palais Garnier, you would have stairs and walkways that all made sense and made a good flow in the build. And so my biggest problem was actually just the fact that I didn't have any diagonal stairs. If I could have added diagonal stairs, that would have solved my problem immediately. But instead what you're seeing is that I'm doing these like platform stairs because no matter what I tried otherwise, like nothing made sense. But I am still struggling a little bit with the diagonal stairs, getting them just right, getting them to have this like grand feel, but also seeming functional. And so what I wanted here at the end, what I'm trying to achieve, is to have this staircase that sort of slowly spreads out. And I do end up, I think, somewhat pulling it off to the best of my ability, to the best that we could really do with like all of the walls that we also had surrounding it. And it ends up working, I think, quite well. But it is just a lot of me adding fences, raising things, lowering things, because I really struggle with like doing things diagonally, because it's almost like you can then all of a sudden work on like half tiles. It's hard to explain. If you build something yourself, I think you might know what I mean. But yeah, that was why it took like multiple tries until I actually had a proper looking functional staircase. So this is the other side. Technically everything is symmetrical, but I just wanted to quickly try a different option, because from the grand hall we already have this like raised up area, and then we also have the red carpet area that you can see that is access to all of the balconies that is raised even further. So I was thinking, what if instead of like having you go downstairs and then having you go upstairs, if it was just like stairs going down to the door? I hope that explanation made sense, but that is what I'm trying to do here, but it doesn't really work. And you also probably saw that it just like glitched out a couple of times where it was like invalid room. So we do end up going with the same stairs as we have on the other side, and now you just get a quick little view of what it like looks like, and it's all symmetrical, and I think it actually worked out quite nicely. Now, when I say that it worked out nicely, I just want to clarify that I mean worked out nicely with what I had to work with, because I do think it would have looked better if I just had like more space to do more and bigger stairs. But since that was an option, here we are. So another task that comes with doing a build like this is not only making each of the rooms make sense and make each of the floors make sense, but it's very much also making multiple floors make sense together, because we do have these like open spaces. So that's why there are multiple shots of me just like going upstairs, going downstairs, going upstairs, going downstairs, to check that everything kind of makes sense, and then adding a little wall here to close that area off, because it's really important for me that when you actually look at everything from like a top-down view, it looks cohesive. But after hours of work, the staircases to the left and the right of the grand staircase are now finally done. So from here, we're moving back into the grand hall, to like the main staircase area, because we are not done. We are never done. I feel like I could work on this build endlessly and basically never finish. But on the third floor, so above the original arches that we have, I'm now adding some smaller arches, because that is again just like a feature that I could see in the pictures. And that's also how I know that my rooms definitely is nothing like the rooms in real life, because I now have archways that have like no floor, because I decided to do like an open space on the other side of the wall. But I still think from inside the grand hall, it looks right. dare I say it? I think it looks right. So you saw me quickly add debug fences from vampires to actually get some railing. And then we are adding multiple of these small light posts because they have these like lamps with just a lot of light bulbs. Yes, that is what you call them. And now we come to the part that I have dreaded, because I do not know when it happened, but at some point there was just a visual glitch with our stage. So I now have this wall that technically doesn't exist. Like the little red box constantly says like nothing to change, or it also just like sometimes gave a message that I've never seen. I think it just said like something invalid, and I had no idea what to actually do about this. So I tried with the arches to see if I could maybe somehow at least like visually get rid of it. I also tried actually creating a wall, deleting it. That messed up the entire room and deleted my curved walls. And eventually the game just wasn't having it and it crashed, which is why I was very happy that before doing any of this, because I knew that this was a risk, I saved so I could quickly come back in and try once again to fix it. So my thought was that if I kind of replaced the curved walls, like added them back in, maybe that would cause the glitch to disappear. But that didn't work either, and I now instead experienced this weird fence glitch where the game was kind of telling me that it was the fence that I had placed, but it clearly wasn't. And all I could do was just undo. So I ended up actually force closing the game without saving because I needed it in that like original state. And then I just sort of left it for a while, and we're now moving on, and then we will come back and deal with it a little bit later. So as I've already mentioned, inside the house, it has this incredible ceiling that is just painted all over. And there is just no way for me to do anything like that. So instead I decided to go with a different option, which is what you're seeing here, where we're using multiple different tiles. I actually think all of them are from For Rent, and we're just creating some patterns just to add something to the ceiling. And I actually do think it ended up looking quite good, even though you or your sim will never really be looking at the ceilings. But if you are confused about what's going on, that's why you're not seeing anything else. We are technically working on the ceiling, and I will definitely make sure to show you some screenshots at the end of what this actually looks like. So I worked on some different patterns around the chandelier so that when you're watching it from the inside, from this like weird upward angle, the chandelier is kind of the centerpiece of this like a gorgeous pattern. But from here, we're jumping back to the grand hall, to the grand staircase, because you never finish. You never finish this build. You can always add more details and some more details. So in real life, I would say that these like double arches on top of each other are a bit more seamless. So I was trying some different things with some columns, but nothing really worked or looked that well. And I also just tried to add in some decorative pieces. I didn't really care about what it looked like in real life. It was more so just adding something to the walls because there is so much going on in this hallway. But what ended up working the best was just having the columns at the top. I would have preferred for the columns to go all the way down, but because we have these like fake floors with all of the platforms, that didn't really work because the columns would actually follow the grid, but the floor appeared to be like 7 platforms higher, so that just didn't really work. So we're placing these 2 ballerinas on top of this door along with the other sculptures. I, again, actually don't really know if this might be like the main door into the house, but ours is just a fake door. We are then creating these custom candle holders. There's probably a nicer word than that, but this is made up of not 2, not 3, but 4 vampires candle holders. It's called something else than candle holders, but it's not called a chandelier, right? I don't know. But twisting them, turning them, raising them a little bit and lowering them with the tool mod, and I do think they end up looking pretty cool. Now I told you we would be coming back to the small gaps between the actual stair and the fence. I tried out some different things. I cut it out. It was really boring. I tried to see if I could find a debug piece that would fit, but we do end up just placing a lot of these like knights that I sized down a little bit, and they are sort of just fitted in between the gaps. Then we're adding a chandelier. We're adding some more decorations because why the hell not? And I will admit that I eventually ran out of ideas of like what to add. So a lot of the rooms that I'm not showing you is because they look like all of the other rooms. It just didn't really make any sense to spend a lot of time on decorating rooms in a build that serves like no function. So that's why, as I've already mentioned, I just decided to focus on the 3 areas that are most commonly shown in the pictures if you search for the interior of the Palais Garnier. So here at the end of this very long foyer, we have, I'm pretty sure it's a fireplace or some other detail. In The Sims 4, it's going to be a fireplace. And I again wanted to add some more decoration. So I tried with those suns and custom place it and see if I could almost make like a frame. And that obviously didn't look very good. So I deleted it immediately and instead put in this piece from our latest event. I think I'm reaching a point where I don't really know how I feel about the events or the items from the events. I feel like on one hand, I'm like, take whatever is free. On the other hand, I'm like not really wanting to support it in any way. But that little board, believe it or not, was just what ended up looking the best as this like backdrop for the fireplace. We're then doing a little bit of a custom ceiling. This time we're using tiles from high school years. And even though you won't really see them, I honestly really enjoyed doing these ceilings. I think it's just a fun little like extra thing. So we then have some final decorations. I decorated some of the other rooms. I'm just not going to show you because again, it's just very repetitive and there's really no reason. And then finally, as I've kind of finished everything else, I was like, let me save. Let me also upload this to the gallery just so that I have a version that I know somewhat works. And then let me try once and for all to actually fix this wall glitch. So my idea here was that if I just placed enough arches, like covering the entire wall, and I then sized them down with the tool mud so that they basically weren't visible, then I could almost just visually at least get rid of the wall. So since I could see that that worked, I was like, okay, let me just try a few other things and then I know that that works and that's like our last resort. And now this wasn't even related to me trying to fix the wall. I just realized that I had missed a like half wall trim and I was like, let me just get that. And then the wall just disappeared and I was like, well, I guess that's a kind of a miracle, but also how have I tried all of these different things trying to get rid of the wall? And then changing a wall trim is what fixes it. I don't know, and it will forever be a mystery. Anyway, the build is now as done as I set out for it to be, but I still think there are a lot of things that we might have missed in the video. So I will load up the game and I will give you a final tour. So I forgot that I hadn't placed back the custom roof. With custom roofs, as soon as you add any like walls, they just delete themselves. I ran out of time when building, but this is also the only time I have to really record the voiceover. So just know that the roofs will be back. I will make sure that the roofs are back, but we are looking more on the inside. I added a few plants. I also added a little bit of terrain here and there and also some benches outside. But otherwise, the outside is still very much like it is after the first video. So inside, if we just start with an overview. So this is what would be the 3rd floor. This is where we have the chandeliers. As I mentioned, this chandelier right there is matched up with this area right here that will have the rounded roof. Yes. And then our 2nd chandelier that I just added in. We have this like pretty big hallway space that is also very empty. And with a lot of these rooms, I was like, oh, like I should be adding more to them. But I also realized that technically you probably just have a lot of big hallways because there would be like so many people going in and out of this place, so still kind of makes sense. So this is just the overtop view. You can see the rest of them I just blacked out. I just go in with like black paint and black flooring so that you don't really pay attention to them. And then we have a few rooms that aren't blacked out but that don't really serve any purpose either. So this is really the only thing for the upper floor. So going downstairs, we can now see like our grand staircase. We can also see the stage a little bit better. We then have the rooms here on the sides. Those are left empty as well. I think in real life there's like a restaurant and a library, but again I didn't want to continue adding to it because this is already just like such a big build, such a heavy build. We then have our custom staircases leading to the door here, the smaller staircase leading up to the door to all of the balconies, and yes, I added curtains to absolutely everything. Please be proud. Thank you very much. And then at the ground floor, this is what it looks like, a few blacked out rooms. I did decide to go in and add toilets because then if you ever want to use it for anything and maybe add a few things yourself, at least you have some toilet. And then I added one piano because if you want a sim to just come and visit for fun, they can play piano right here. But I know that right from the top it looks like really empty. I feel like if we do like this, you can see a few more decorations. So most rooms have some mirrors on the walls. With a lot of them, I also redid like the fireplace thing that I already done. But I also think we honestly get almost like a better look of the grand staircase, which I do like how this part turned out. I do think that's similar enough to what it's like in real life so that you can actually see what it's supposed to be. I also do quite like the foyer. I mean, I think it's pretty nice. And if we zoom in, let me try and see if I can get you a proper angle. There we go. So then we have the ceiling, which doesn't like match the best. But again, in real life, this would just like be painted, and I feel like technically that doesn't really match either because you now just have like a huge large painting. We also have a custom ceiling in here. Let's see if we can get a proper angle, and then maybe doing this, maybe going a little bit forward, maybe looking up, adding a floor, adding another floor. Okay, there we have it. Yes, so another custom ceiling. This is also from For Rent, just in the blue version. Added a little bit of a pattern in here as well. And then last but not least, our stage and our house. So you already saw a bit of the stage with the props that I added, which I do think turned out quite nicely. I also added these lights because of course you would have like lights from the ceiling, but that's not really possible. Like these two chandeliers basically give like no light in this room. So I added these two down here on the stage itself. So if we just start here, you can sort of see the different levels. We have the two balconies that match because these are technically separate floors. So we have the tall wall height and the short wall height. And then we have the fake balcony area in between. I think it worked out quite well. I do like how this turned out. And with this wide angle, you can really see all the way around. The balcony in the back, you can't use that at all. Like there's not even an entrance to it. Those are just for looks. And then let's go forward a little bit and look up a little bit more. And you have our ceilings that unfortunately aren't very well lit. And because of the curved walls, I couldn't add ceiling to like the sides because it like glitched out with the curved flooring. I don't really know how to explain it, but that's why it's like wide on the side. I would have wanted it to be tile all the way, but that was not an option. So lastly, I just want to once again say thank you to Linda who requested this build originally. And also I want to apologize to Linda and the rest of you for this build being a little bit unfinished. If you want to see me furnish everything, if more than like 2 people requested in the comments, I might come back to this. But otherwise, for me personally, it was the most important that we got the foyer, we got the grand hall with the staircase, and we also got the stage and the house done. And I think we've accomplished that with this one. And since it doesn't really serve any purpose, I didn't really finish the rest of it. I am sorry, but this is now what we have. I will upload this to the gallery once I have fixed the roof. And with that, I wish you a lovely day. I hope to see you next time, and bye! And now I need to open the doors, open the windows, because Denmark is hit by a heat wave in this room and my computer is getting so damn hot.